Welcome to today's story, where love, betrayal, and karma collide in ways you won't believe. Imagine building a life with someone, trusting them with your heart, only to find out it was all a lie. But sometimes, just when someone thinks they've gotten away with everything, karma has a way of catching up. This is a tale of heartbreak, discovery, and sweet revenge. Sit back, get comfortable, and prepare for an emotional journey. This isn't just a story, it's a confession, a look into the raw reality of betrayal and the strength it takes to rebuild after everything falls apart. Let's dive in. From the outside, it seemed like I had it all. People often told me how lucky I was, how they admired the life I'd built and the strength I found after years of struggling alone. I came from a small town where everyone knew everyone else, and hard work was the language of survival. My family didn't have much, but they raised me with values that I clung to: loyalty, honesty, and above all, resilience. Life hadn't handed me much, so whatever I achieved felt like a hard-won treasure. Then I met her, and it was as if the final piece of my world had fallen into place. She had this warmth, this light that drew people to her. She was everything I never knew I needed, and somehow, despite all my flaws and insecurities, she chose me. Our love felt like a miracle, a bond that went beyond words, built on shared dreams and whispered promises. I would have given her the world if I could. For years we were happy, or so I believed. We worked hard, laughed often, and found joy in the little moments. I thought our relationship was unbreakable, solidified by years of mutual support and trust. But it turns out no matter how strong you think you are, betrayal has a way of cutting right to the bone. At first, I dismissed the small changes, chalking them up to the natural ebb and flow of any long-term relationship. She started coming home later than usual, claiming work was piling up or that she'd run into friends and lost track of time. I wanted to believe her. After all, she'd never given me a reason not to trust her, and I had no reason to doubt. But doubt, once planted, has a way of rooting itself deep, feeding off the smallest of suspicions until it grows into something impossible to ignore. I'd catch her checking her phone, eyes darting to the screen with a nervous smile, then quickly tucking it away when she saw me watching. Or the times she'd excuse herself, slipping out of the room to take a call, her voice a hushed murmur from the other side of a closed door. She'd brush it off, of course, tell me it was work or something trivial. I wanted to believe her so badly. I wanted to be the supportive partner, the one who trusted unconditionally. But every time I saw that phone screen light up, something inside me twisted. Our conversations began to feel shallow, like she was holding back. She wasn't as present. Her mind always seemed somewhere else, as if she was carrying a secret too heavy for our love to bear. I'd catch myself watching her, studying the way her smile didn't reach her eyes the way it used to, or how her laughter felt forced, as if she were acting out some pretense for my sake. One night, I asked her directly, "Is everything okay? You seem distant lately?" She laughed, that brittle laugh that didn't fool either of us. "Of course, everything's fine. Just a bit stressed with work, you know how it is." And then she reached for my hand, squeezing it just a bit too hard. A reassurance that fell flat, leaving me more unsettled than before. But as the weeks wore on, her distance grew more noticeable, more tangible. She'd pull away when I tried to hold her, and our conversations became stilted, filled with silences that hung heavy between us. My stomach knotted with an unease I couldn't shake, an insistent whisper that something was deeply, terribly wrong. Yet, every time I tried to bring it up, she'd smile, that same practiced smile, and tell me I was overthinking, being paranoid. So I stayed silent, hoping against hope that my suspicions were unfounded, that everything would go back to normal. But deep down I knew. I could feel the fracture growing, widening beneath the surface, threatening to crack our world open, and I was powerless to stop it. The truth didn't come in a neat package. It arrived in fragments, little pieces of evidence that felt innocuous on their own, but, together, painted a picture I wasn't prepared to see. It was late on a Friday night when the first undeniable crack appeared. She'd left her phone on the kitchen counter, a rare moment of forgetfulness that seemed almost too convenient. I don't know what compelled me to pick it up. Maybe it was the months of pent-up suspicion, the weight of all those small moments that I'd tried to ignore. Whatever it was, my hands moved almost on their own, a quiet desperation guiding my fingers as I swiped the screen open. And there it was, a message from a name I didn't recognize, a name that instantly set my heart racing. Tonight was perfect. Can't wait to see you again. I felt a jolt of shock, the kind that leaves you breathless, hollow. I scrolled up, my fingers trembling, reading the exchange that had clearly been going on for weeks. Late-night confessions, hidden laughter, plans made in the secrecy of dark hours when she thought I was asleep. The words blurred on the screen as I struggled to keep myself steady. My mind went numb, grasping for some explanation that didn't involve the betrayal staring back at me. But no amount of rationalizing could erase the reality spelled out in front of me. She had another life, one she'd carefully hidden, slipping out of my grasp each time she left with an excuse, each time she pulled away with a distant smile. The house felt too small, the walls pressing in around me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I paced the room, clutching her phone like it was some cursed object that had shattered everything I thought I knew. My heart pounded in my chest, a painful, relentless beat that only reminded me how foolish I'd been, how blind. Images flooded my mind, memories of us together, the life we'd built, now tainted by the poison of betrayal. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered promise replayed in my head, each one now a bitter reminder of what I'd lost. I wanted to scream, to break something, to somehow let out the anger that was building, clawing its way up from the pit of my stomach. But the pain was too raw, too consuming. I sank to the floor, her phone still in my hand, and felt the first tears burn down my cheeks. I didn't cry often, but in that moment, there was no holding back. Everything inside me broke, and the pieces fell one by one, leaving me empty and lost. The hours slipped by in a haze as I sat there, consumed by waves of grief and fury. I replayed every moment of our relationship, searching for signs, for clues I might have missed. How could she do this? How could she lie, look me in the eyes day after day, and pretend that we were okay? I didn't know how long I sat there, numb and broken, until I heard the door click open. She walked in, oblivious to the storm brewing in my chest, still wearing that practiced smile, the one I'd once thought was for me alone. But now, I saw it for what it was, a mask. A lie. "Hey," she said, her voice casual, warm, as if nothing was wrong. The anger surged inside me, sharper than any pain I'd felt, and I knew I couldn't hold it in any longer. Without a word, I held up her phone, letting the screen speak for itself. Her face fell, and for a split second I saw fear flash in her eyes, a guilty, panicked look that only confirmed what I already knew. I didn't need her to explain. The truth was right there, and it was more than enough to break me. For a moment, there was only silence. A thick, suffocating silence that filled the space between us like a weight pressing down on my chest. I watched her, waiting for something, an apology, an explanation, anything that might make this nightmare feel less real. But she just stood there, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't find the words, like she knew that no words could undo what she'd done. "Why?" My voice came out, barely more than a whisper, raw and cracked. I could feel the anger boiling inside me, but it was drowned by a wave of sadness so deep it felt like it would swallow me whole. "After everything? Why?" She looked down, avoiding my eyes. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said, her voice small and trembling, as if she were the one hurting. The audacity of it struck me like a slap to the face. "You didn't mean for this to happen?" I repeated, the disbelief thick in my voice. "You didn't mean to lie to me, to sneak around behind my back? How long, huh? How long have you been pretending?" Her eyes filled with tears. but I felt nothing for them. They felt hollow, like they were for her own guilt, not for the pain she'd caused me. It just, it just happened. I didn't plan it, I swear. I didn't want to hurt you. Then why didn't you stop? My voice was rising, a mix of fury and heartbreak I couldn't control. If you didn't want to hurt me, why did you keep doing it? Why did you keep looking me in the eye, acting like everything was fine, when you knew it was all a lie? She tried to reach for me, her hand trembling as it moved toward mine. But I pulled back, the thought of her touch now tainted, something I couldn't bear. Please, just listen to me, she pleaded, her voice breaking. I was lost, okay? I was confused and I made a mistake. But I still love you. The words felt like knives twisting deeper into the wounds she'd already carved into me. Love? I scoffed, the bitterness spilling over. You don't do this to someone you love. You don't lie, you don't betray them. You don't make them feel like they're the only one in your life when you're sharing yourself with someone else. You didn't love me. You loved the comfort, the security, but you didn't love me. Her face contorted with pain, her tears now falling freely. But there was no comfort in it for me, only a cold satisfaction in seeing her crumble, knowing that she was finally feeling a fraction of what she'd put me through. I was weak, she whispered, almost to herself. I didn't know how to tell you. I was scared of losing you. Well, congratulations, I said, my voice sharp and cold. You've lost me now. She sank onto the couch, covering her face with her hands, sobbing in a way that once would have broken my heart. But now, all I could feel was an emptiness where my love for her used to be, replaced by a hollow void, a chasm too deep for any apology to bridge. What do you want me to say? She asked, her voice muffled, desperate. Tell me what I can do to make this right. I stared at her, my mind racing through the memories, the life we'd built, now shattered into pieces I couldn't put back together. There's nothing you can do, I said, my voice calm, almost detached. You can't erase this. You can't undo the lies, the betrayal. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. She looked up, her eyes wide, searching my face as if trying to find some sign of forgiveness, some indication that I could look past this and we could somehow move on. But there was nothing left for her to find. Is he worth it? The question came out before I could stop it. Bitter and raw. Is he worth throwing everything away? She hesitated, a flicker of guilt flashing across her face. And in that moment, I knew the answer, even if she couldn't bring herself to say it. He was worth enough for her to betray me, to destroy the trust we'd built, the life we'd created together. I couldn't bear to look at her anymore. Every second in her presence felt like a reminder of the person I thought she was, the person she'd pretended to be, and the stranger she'd revealed herself to be. I need you to leave, I said, finally, my voice barely a whisper, drained of all the anger, the sadness, everything. Her face crumpled, but I turned away, unable to watch as she gathered her things, each movement a final punctuation mark on the end of our life together. The door closed behind her, and I was left in the silence, a silence that echoed louder than any scream, filled with the shattered remnants of what once was. After she left, I sat alone in the silence, the weight of everything that had just happened pressing down on me like a boulder. The stillness in the house was haunting, filled with memories that no longer felt like mine. Every room, every piece of furniture, every photo hanging on the walls was a reminder of the life we'd built together, a life that now felt like it belonged to someone else, a stranger who had been foolish enough to believe in love and trust. I thought about her words, replaying them in my mind like some twisted lullaby, the hollow excuses, the feigned guilt, the tears that came too late. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to feel the kind of anger that would burn her memory out of my mind and leave me empty, untouched by the scars she left behind. But the pain ran too deep. It twisted and turned inside me, leaving me torn between fury and heartbreak, revenge and forgiveness. Days passed in a blur, each one bleeding into the next as I tried to make sense of what was left of my life. Friends reached out, offering sympathy and comfort, but I couldn't bear to talk about it. I didn't want their pity, their reassurances that I'd be fine, that I'd find someone better. None of it mattered. All I could think about was her face, the way she'd looked at me when I held up her phone, that flicker of fear when she realized she'd been caught. And in that fear, I saw something else, a vulnerability, a weakness that she'd tried so hard to hide. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. She'd betrayed me, shattered my trust, and yet she had the audacity to look hurt, to act as if she were the victim. The rage simmered inside me, growing stronger each time I remembered her excuses, her hollow apologies. She'd destroyed our life without a second thought, and now I was the one left to pick up the pieces, to somehow find a way to move on. But moving on felt impossible. I couldn't just let it go, couldn't just walk away and pretend that everything would be okay. No, she had to know. She had to feel the pain she'd inflicted, to understand the depth of the hurt she'd caused. And so, slowly, the idea of revenge began to take shape in my mind. It started as a whisper, a fleeting thought, but the more I dwelled on it, the more it grew, filling the empty spaces left by the love I once felt. I knew where she worked, knew the people in her life who looked up to her, respected her. She had always been careful to maintain a certain image, a facade of kindness and loyalty that everyone around her bought into. But I knew the truth now, the cracks in her perfect persona, and I was ready to expose them. I wanted the world to see her as I saw her, a liar, a cheater, a hypocrite who'd hidden her true self behind a mask. I started small, reaching out to a few mutual friends, subtly dropping hints about what she'd done. Word spread quickly, and soon the whispers began to reach her. I knew she'd be furious, that she'd hate me for tearing down the image she'd worked so hard to build. But I didn't care. Every rumor, every look of judgment that came her way felt like a small victory, a step toward reclaiming the power she'd stolen from me. But it wasn't enough. The satisfaction was fleeting, disappearing as quickly as it came, leaving me with the same hollow ache, the same unanswered questions. No amount of revenge could erase the memories, the love I'd once felt. The pain was still there, gnawing at me, a constant reminder of what I'd lost. One night, as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, I realized that revenge wasn't healing me. It was only feeding the anger, keeping me trapped in a cycle of bitterness that would never end. And in that moment, I understood that the only way to truly move on was to let go of the hatred, the need for vengeance, the hold she still had on my heart. The next day, I deleted every trace of her from my life. Her photos, her messages, the reminders of the life we'd once shared. I erased them all. It felt like shedding a weight, like taking the first step toward a freedom I hadn't known I needed. It wasn't easy. Each deletion felt like a final goodbye to a part of myself I would never get back. But with each one, I felt a little lighter, a little closer to peace. And as the days turned into weeks, I began to find myself again. I took up old hobbies, reconnected with friends, started building a life that was mine and mine alone. The memories of her lingered, of course, but they no longer held the same power. They were just shadows, remnants of a chapter I had finally closed. I realized then that revenge was never the answer, that true healing could only come from within. And in that moment of clarity, I felt a sense of peace, a quiet strength that filled the empty spaces she'd left behind. I was free. In the months that followed, I learned to live with the silence, the emptiness that came from severing the ties I once thought would last a lifetime. At first, it felt like I was floating through life in a haze, just going through the motions. Work, sleep, eat, repeat. But gradually, the numbness began to fade, and in its place, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. The memories of her, once sharp and painful, began to soften, taking on a distant, almost dreamlike quality. I could still remember the good moments, the laughter and love we once shared, but they no longer haunted me. They were simply moments in time, pieces of a past that no longer defined me. I found myself revisiting those memories less and less, until one day I realized that I hadn't thought of her in weeks. Life began to feel different, lighter somehow, as if I were rediscovering parts of myself that had been buried under years of compromise and devotion. I poured myself into things I loved, books I'd always wanted to read, places I dreamed of visiting. For the first time in years, I wasn't living for anyone else. I was living for myself. Every now and then, I'd hear whispers about her, stories from mutual friends who'd kept tabs on her life. I'd heard she'd tried to repair the damage her actions had caused, tried to rebuild the reputation I'd shattered in my quest for revenge. But that was her battle, her journey to face. I no longer felt the need to concern myself with her choices, her regrets. Her life was hers, and mine was mine. And there were moments, of course, when the scars felt fresh again, when I'd hear a song or see a place that reminded me of her, of us. In those moments, I felt a bittersweet ache, a reminder of the person I used to be, of the love I'd once given so freely. But even those moments became easier to bear, until they too faded into the background of my life. One evening, as I watched the sunset from a quiet spot overlooking the city, I realized that I was finally at peace. I'd walked through fire, faced betrayal and heartbreak, and come out the other side stronger, wiser. I'd learned that love, real love, wasn't about losing yourself for someone else. It was about building a life that was whole and complete, with or without them. I didn't know what the future held, and for the first time, I was okay with that. I'd let go of the past, let go of the anger, and in doing so, I'd found a version of myself I hadn't known existed. A version that was whole, resilient, unbreakable. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in a warm, golden glow, I felt a quiet smile spread across my face. I was ready for whatever came next. I was ready to live again.